Good morning. I think we can still say that for a little bit longer. My name is Kevin Kiley. As mentioned, I'm president of a company called AIRIA, so I appreciate the spelling. Come a long way from the United States to be part of this event today, and I want to say how honored I am to get to follow such an esteemed group of speakers this morning, and I know we've got a full agenda today. My talk is relatively short. We're going to spend probably the next 18, 19 minutes talking through some of the key challenges that you'll face, if you haven't already, in scaling your program. Looking at the evolution of the space itself and many of the roadblocks or obstacles that you're going to encounter if you haven't already. I know they're loading up the slides in the background, so I think we're ready to go. And I'll begin by stating the obvious. Everything has changed. We heard that this morning from the speakers already. We know that there is so much incredible potential, the way that AI will impact the way that each of your organizations are doing business today and whatever your function is. But we also know there's tremendous risk that comes with this as well. And the pace of the evolution that is happening is really something to behold. The way that we see the models themselves advancing, there is this arms race happening between each of the major providers, where we're going from what was a new leader every few months to now being every couple of weeks or even days. We are seeing massive advancements in the technology and the capacity and the power that these models provide. Just this week with Google's latest releases, we've seen them make a huge leap forward. Last week in Las Vegas, Amazon revealed their new models and the updates, and you saw a huge impact to not only the power, but also that they're getting much, much cheaper. The costs are rapidly going down. And this pace, again, just continues. You see this over the last few years, just how much movement there has been, and that the indexes, the way that they've been benchmarking these models, is now having to be completely rewritten every few quarters because, again, we are surpassing what was expected to be the best in the top indexes across these. So as your organization looks at these models, picking a model to build your process, your application, your agents, your pipeline on, even if you pick the best one today, you can be relatively confident that tomorrow there's going to be a better one for your needs. There's going to be something that is going to be more capable, more powerful for what you're trying to do, and it's going to produce more accurate results, and it may even be cheaper. You'll want to be able to prepare your architecture in such a way that allows you to be nimble, to stay current, because we can expect that the technology is going to continue to advance, that there's this fortuitous cycle where the technology is actually enhancing itself and getting better, getting smarter, getting more and more capable. And if that's not enough, your providers, those vendors that you work with, are likely going to push you to move off of their models. You see that the deprecation cycles for the technology you're using is going to require that you move off of that model because there's a new one coming and they're going to want you to take that. For those of you that are in IT or have spent your years working on these applications, these operating systems that you've relied on, you might have had 6, 7, even 10 years between upgrade cycles where you had to go refresh. Now you're looking at this being a matter of months, sometimes even weeks, between having to move to the new model because the last one is being deprecated and won't be available to you anymore. The cost, as I mentioned, is also changing very quickly. If you and your organization had built an application on ChatGPT 4.0 when it first came out, and we heard all of this buzz, all of the talk about how capable it was, the prices were about $15 per million input tokens and about $60 per a million output tokens. Now, just in the subsequent release, the one that came out right after that, that price dropped to $15 per million output tokens. And the release after that, down to $10. And then with ChatGPT 4.0 Mini, you got down to 15 or 60 cents per million output tokens. Now, I mentioned the Amazon announcements last week, where this is, you're seeing performance levels that are comparable or even better in some areas, and we're down to a fraction of that cost. So the slides don't even keep up with how quickly some of this is evolving. And the reason I emphasize this point is, again, as you think about the way that you're building out your programs and architecting your own capabilities and applications and agents and pipelines you may be creating, being able to stay fluid or dynamic and which model you choose will become more and more important. And this is a big message for everyone. And it's not just, again, performance, it's cost, and it's also in security. you're going to see that these new models become better at protecting themselves, at being smarter to resist what might be a malicious actor attempting a prompt injection attack. Dr. Al-Quadi's talk just before mine, he went through a number of the more recent threats that we're seeing. And indeed, in the last few months, we've seen major health systems, financial institutions, and others, real attacks in the wild that have been successful because of the new vulnerabilities that AI introduces. But as the models evolve, again, they're going to get better and better at hardening themselves, at being smarter about protecting. You will still have to think about how you protect yourself from data poisoning and other malicious, again, sometimes benign actors who aren't intending to do bad, and in the process endangering the way that your models are performing. Of course, there's other concerns around data theft, the model provenance. On the runtime side, you've got to think about overly permissed models, or perhaps your model's not being permission aware, excessive agency, the idea that these models can go do things that they weren't intended to do because they've been given too lax of controls, that you didn't set the right permissions around them. These can be very difficult challenges to anticipate. And indeed, again, we've heard a lot of organizations facing problems with this. Companies that opened up their SharePoint to perhaps their Microsoft Copilot instance that was provided. And now they're finding that very sensitive data that was never intended to be shared across the employee base is now available to anyone. You simply go ask Copilot, perhaps what is my colleague making per year, or other sensitive details around the business and financial performance. The point is, there are a lot of new threats that are being introduced, and again, you're going to have a real imperative to keep current with what's out there, and making sure that you're using the latest and greatest to protect your organization. I'll step through an example because I think this is one that probably resonates with a lot of your organizations. If you've started building AI, oftentimes those first applications were easy enough. It was a simple input and output. I would select whichever model provider I was going to use and go and show the power to my colleagues, really deliver something for the business. Very easy to set up, very easy to deliver on. And of course, the success of one pilot often leads to multiple business users coming forward and saying, we have this great idea, can we use AI for this? As those use cases start to multiply, again, easy enough when we're on one provider and when this is all fairly homogeneous. As you start getting into different versions, though, the complications really start to multiply, because now I've got different releases from perhaps OpenAI in this case, and each of those has their own upgrade schedule that I've got to be aware of. They've also got their own cost inputs. They've also got their own security concerns with each version. And as I start to bring in other providers, those costs, those concerns start to really multiply. Now I've got to think about each one of these providers and their own upgrade schedule, how they're deploying. When do we have to move off of it? How much is it going to cost? How do I charge back to those departments? How do I keep ahead of threats that might be known for each one of these, because they're going to have their own risks? And if that's not enough, then you start layering in your own data sources. So I want to have access to company databases because I need the model to be smart enough to be informed by what's happened here, whatever history we have. I also want to tie in those core enterprise applications, and now I've got to think about all the API integrations that have to be managed and kept current and made really durable across the business. And of course, it's not enough to just have that static information. I need to have real-world context about what did this employee ask in the past, and what do we know about them, or this customer, or the products that they're buying. All of that context has to be part of the way that these models are performing. And of course, I'm going to want to see that not only are we pulling this information in, but that we're also able to write back to it, and that this is a two-way sync. As we're interacting and transacting with customers, with employees, that the data is getting written both ways. And for most organizations, you're also going to want to then go further and fine-tuning that model, doing its own training, maybe custom prompting. And what you see on the screen here is a picture that some of your organizations are probably already facing. There are so many variables that quickly become apparent. And I'm telling you that this is just the beginning. Today, we talk a lot about the big LLMs, but there are over 1 million models now hosted on Hugging Face. They crossed that line over about a month ago. And they're adding new models at the pace of about 5,000 per week. So this explosion of new models and capability is only going to make this picture even more complicated for you to manage. It's one thing to get it set up, But living with this, keeping current with this, keeping it secure and up to date is going to be increasingly a challenge that many of you will have to face in your organizations. That is why our company has introduced an orchestration platform, and we're going to be demonstrating this out on the floor today. So for any of you that are chartered with managing all of this in your business, a tool to provide a list of capabilities here, being able to deploy this on-prem so that you don't have to worry about anyone else's data or national security laws around where data resides. A very flexible architecture that allows you to put it on-prem or in the cloud or use some sort of hybrid capability. We can work with any of the model providers. We have partnerships with Microsoft, OpenAI, Anthropic, Mistral, and all of the other big guys, but also the capacity to host those open source models for you. We can help you deploy and manage those models. You'll find a library of them in the application, and we can always import additional ones that allows you to serve up a model library to your users, so that as an employee of your company, I can go out, I can grab a model and simply drop and drag it along with the data sources or the applications that I want to tie in. I don't have to be a AI engineer or a data scientist to do this. It's very quick and easy for anybody in the business to go out and start building their own agents, their own workflows. We can integrate those core systems and again, abstract you from having to do the integration work yourself or manage those APIs. Again, I instantly drop in those data sources and I can see that the information is being populated, that the AI model can go out and call information it needs to answer questions or perform tasks on your behalf. We can also then give you a lot of insight into the cost consumption, as I mentioned before. The expenses of managing AI are still something a lot of organizations are coming to grips with. As those prices change, you may find that there are new models that are just as capable. And if you could move to one of those, you're going to save a tremendous amount of cost. We also find that in some cases, you may want to route certain low-cost queries to different models. So don't use the 1 trillion parameter big LLM for every inbound inquiry. Instead, route those to the ones that really need that sort of sophistication and power. And for those that don't, you can use a smaller, more efficient model that may be just as effective for what you're trying to do. Within this, we can also help you predict and forecast your costs. We can do the IT chargeback that you need to your different departments to show where the consumption is happening. And when we see a project running away that is burning up a lot of costs, you can actually throttle it here or even stop it, all from one single control plane. I talked a lot about the need to stay current and being able to optimize which model you're using. This is, again, a core function of our offering that allows you to move between models dynamically so that as a new version comes out, I can swap it out without breaking anything. It keeps it all under the hood and allows you to very easily move between your different providers and the different releases that they're offering in their product. Beyond that, applying security controls. And again, I'll come back to Dr. Al-Kawadi's talk just before mine. This is the next battleground. And just as there's so much promise for good with AI, the bad actors are going to do their best to use this as a new way to exploit your security controls. We offer the ability for you to proxy all of the data that is going into your models so that I can now see what information is being fed in and prevent something sensitive from perhaps being shared to a model that we know is not secure or perhaps a model that is not being hosted on-prem. You may face pressure to allow your users to use some of these tools that are out online. Let us be that last barrier that prevents sensitive information from going out, or at least warns the user that the data that they're sharing with that model contains sensitive information that could present a risk. So we'll monitor all of the input, give you full DLP capabilities to not only monitor and audit it, but also control it. And then on the output side, to also monitor what the model is doing. We can look for problems with accuracy, temperature, perhaps hallucinations, and give you a flag when we see something that is concerning happening across one of these models. If there's a bad actor that is, again, trying to use a prompt injection attack or do denial of service and just flood them, we can give you warnings about that and alert you to it by monitoring and giving you full observability of the way that the model is performing. And then lastly, as we are just getting into this now, you're going to continue to see new AI regulations taking place. Not only will you have to contend with other cybersecurity regulations and privacy regulations like Europe's GDPR, We now see, just yesterday, Brazil passed an AI compliance law that many organizations that do business with Brazilian citizens are going to be subject to. Even if you aren't based in Brazil, you may find that the extraterritoriality of those laws applies to your business and would subject you to this. We'll give you the ability to document your compliance with these regulations, show that you've taken the right steps to protect your systems, protect the data, and also that you're keeping it current and keeping it in a steady state. All within one tool, again, that provides that single source of compliance. So, as I said, we are out on the floor today and would welcome a chance to speak with you about your organization's needs. AIRIA is a US-based company with a large growing presence here in the Middle East. We have about 11 offices today around the world. Although we're a relatively new company, we have worked with many of your organizations in the past across our two past companies. We were the team behind AirWatch, which was a mobile security, mobile device management company that scaled very quickly. We sold that to VMware in 2014. And then several of us on the leadership team went on to build another company, OneTrust, which also, again, focused on compliance and privacy as well as security, cybersecurity compliance for regulations. We'd welcome the opportunity to get to talk to you a little bit about that history and how it informs what we do today. I hope you'll have a chance to visit us at the booth out on the floor later this afternoon. Thanks very much for the time this morning.